Dear learners, today we are going to discuss about JDBC connectivity, Java database connectivity. When you create an application in Java, so how to connect this backend database? So using this JDBC connectivity, that's what we are going to discuss today. And when you see the fundamental steps involved in the process of connecting to a database and executing a query consists of the following. So these are the steps excuse me, involved in database connectivity. First one is you have to import the corresponding JDBC packages. So that's the first step. And the second step is you have to load and register the JDBC driver. So you need a separate driver for connecting. So you have to load and register the JDBC driver. And the third one is you have to open a connection to the database. Yes, that is, you have to establish the connection to the database. Then only you can retrieve the data from the database. Okay. And the fourth step is to create a statement object to perform a query. Now you're going to call a query from your application. That is either sometimes you may use a select query or insert query, update query, any query. So you're going to execute your query from your Java. Okay, so for that you have to create a statement object to perform the query, and then you have to execute the statement object and return a query result. So that will be available in the result set. And the sixth step is to process the result set. That is what using the data that you have retrieved from the database, whatever logical operations process you wanted to perform, that has to be done. And then finally, you have to close the result set and the statement object. Finally, you have already established the connection, right? So that connection has to be closed. So these are the 8 steps for establishing connection between your Java application and the backend database. Okay, so the first step is you have to import the JDBC package. Then you have to load and register the JDBC driver. Then you have that is the next step is to open a connection to the database, create a statement object to perform the query, execute the query, process the result set, and then close the result set and statement objects, finally close the connections. We'll see one by one in detail. So what are the steps to connect? First one is you have to create the table in the Oracle database. And then you have to load the driver. So for that, the syntax is class dot to name. Okay. Then you have to mention the driver name. Normally we use this oracle.jdbc.driver.oracle driver. So this driver need to be loaded. The third step, as I said, that is establishing the connection object. So for that, the syntax is in Java, there is a class called connection. Okay. So for that connection class, you have to create an object. And using that object, you have to connect your data. That is, you have to establish the connection. So for that, the syntax is driver manager. Already you have loaded the driver manager, right? Loaded the Oracle driver. So driver manager dot, there is a method called get connection. There is a method called get connection. So within that, you just give jdbc dot oracle thin at localhost, because where is your database is located, so that has to be mentioned properly. And then you have to say this is the Oracle username and this is the Oracle password, so that has to be mentioned. And so that the establish will be the connection will be established. Okay. And then create the statement object. So there is a class called statement. So for that, you have to create a statement object. Using that only, you will execute the actual query. So before that, you have to create the object for the statement. And then you have to execute the query. So the result will be available in the result set. So we have to create an object for that result set. Okay. So result set rs is equal to s dot execute dot query. select star from employee table. So this is our query. So for executing this query, the method we have to use is execute dot query. Okay. So while result set dot next, so what it will do is so your result is available in your result set. Whatever you are extracting from the table, employee table, no, that will be available in the result set. And if you wanted to print it one by one, so in that case, we have used result set dot um, get integer. So that means the first string will be displayed. Okay, this is result set rs dot get integer of 1 means that first attribute will be printed. Okay, and then the next attribute. So here actually your student id, student name, etc. So depending upon the attribute in the table, that will be printed. Okay, finally you have to close the connection. So for that, the syntax is connection. So that connection object dot close. And JDBC is used to connect Java application with Oracle database. This connectivity, JDBC, it's an interface between, okay, it's acts as an interface between your front end Java as well as your backend. So in this, there are 5 steps to perform the database connectivity. First one is the driver class. The driver class to the Oracle database is, so you have to load the driver class. So that is oracle.jdbc.oracle driver. And then, as I said, you have to establish the connection. So connection URL. So the connection URL for the Oracle database is, that is the location. Okay, you have to mention where your database is located. So that has to be mentioned properly. And where this JDBC is the API. As I said, this is the application programming interface. And okay, this JDBC is the interface and Oracle is the database. Okay, thin is the driver that you have used, and localhost is the sender name or which Oracle is running. We may also use IP address. See, for example, if you are using remotely, okay, in that case, you have to use that corresponding IP address. Comma, port name has to be mentioned. Normally, it is 1521. And as I said, this database has to be accessed. Okay, so for using the database, normally you will connect. While you are connecting, will give username and password. The same username and password has to be mentioned correctly. Then only you can access, then only you can establish the connection. Otherwise, establishing connection is not possible. So the first thing is you have to import java.sql. So the important classes and interfaces of JDBC are available in java.sql package. So whatever methods, classes that are needed for performing this database connectivity, that are available in java.sql package. So the first thing is you have to import that package. So in order to access the database, it must be imported in our application. So the syntax, you all know that import java.sql.star. That means all the methods, all the necessary methods and classes that are needed for establishing the connection will be imported. And as I said, the next one is loading and registering the driver. So in order to access the database, it must have a particular driver for the database. In Java, we have to inform the driver manager about the required driver. This is done with the help of the method called forName. Okay, so here we are using this forName class. Okay, we are using the forName method available in the class named class. So class.forName, then you have to mention the path with the driver name. In an application, the user can register more than one driver as well. That is also possible. The statement used to load and register the JDBC ODBC bridge driver is class.forName. Okay, so sun.jdbc.odbc.jdbc ODBC driver. So you have to mention the correct driver name. Then, as I said, we have to establish the connection. So establishing connection means making a connection to access the relational database management system through this JDBC driver. So that acts as an interface. The connection can be established with the help of the method called getConnection method available in the driver manager class. Okay, so already there is a class called driver manager that is available in java.sql package. So in this class, there is a method called get connection, and this method is used to establish the connection between the database and the Java. And the established connection is then set to the new connection object. So you have to create a connection object, okay, and then mention that. Then using that get connection, you have to set the connection, okay, where this DSN is the data source name. When the statement is executed, the connection is set to the connection object. So here the object name is CN. For example, to connect the ODBC data source named my data via JDBC ODBC bridge, the statement is connection CN driver manager get connection. If you're going to use ODBC, then you have to maintain ODBC. Then you have to say that ODBC. And here this your my data. Okay, so the source name is my data. So that has to be mentioned properly. Next one is you have to create the object for the statement. So the statement object is used for executing the static SQL statement and obtaining the result produced by it. Whenever you execute a SQL query, okay, whether it is a select or insert or update. So whenever you are retrieving some values, okay, whenever you're executing a select statement, there is you will retrieve a result. Okay, so that will be available in the result set. And before that, for executing the query, you have to create object for the create statement. And the methods used for creating the statements are statement create statement, returns a new statement object used for general queries. And prepare statement is used to prepare the statement. Again, this prepare statement is a class in Java. It returns a new prepare statement object for a statement called multiple times with multiple different values. So pre-compile to reduce the parsing time. And this callable statement prepare call can also be used. And it returns a new callable statement object for the stored procedure. And then you have to execute the query. After making connections to the database, we are now ready to execute the SQL statement because already we have created the object for the statement as well. So the various methods available in statement object to execute the query are execute query. Okay, so two things are there. One is execute query and other one is execute update. Okay, please remember this execute query. This method is used to execute the query. If it is a select query, you have to use the method called execute query. Okay, and this execute update. So execute a SQL statement that returns a single result set. After executing the SQL statement, the requested data is stored in the result set. Okay. For executing this insert, update, delete. Okay. So for executing that, you have to use execute update instead of execute query, and it returns the number of rows, how many rows are changed. Okay, so that value will be returned. And this then execute a SQL statement that may return multiple results. Then step 6 is you have to retrieve the result. A result set provides access to the table of data generated by executing a statement. Only one result set per statement can be opened at once. The table rows are retrieved in sequence. The result set maintains a cursor pointing to its current row of the data, and the next method is used to move the cursor to the next row. See, for example, different methods are there. When you say first, okay, it will be moved to the first record. Similarly, if you say that, if you call that method called last, it will move to the last record. And for example, it is reading a corresponding row, and next row if you wanted to read, then you have to use the method called next. So now, for example, you might be reading values through your application and you may wanted to insert that values into the database, or from the database you may be retrieving the values, and that values you may be using in the processing, okay, in the business process. So that process and all you have to complete, and finally you have to close the connection and the statement. When the client request is completed, we have to close the created object of connection and the statement using the close method. So the close method is used to um, close the connection. Okay, so you have to close the statement as well as, so for statement as well as connections you have created object, right? So both the things has to be closed. And see, this is a sample code for doing your JDBC connectivity. As I said, first thing is you have to import the java.sql package. Okay, you have to import java.sql package. And we all know that this public class, okay, so this will be executed first. Okay, so this is your main method. Within the main method, you have to use, okay, so you have to establish the you have to connect the driver, right? So for that, okay, so you have to use the class dot for name. So this has to be used. And the second step is you have to establish the connection. You all know that how to do that using the get connection method. The important thing is you have to give the URL properly without any mistake, then only it will work. And then you have to create object for the statement, okay. Yeah, and then the retrieved result will be, okay, the retrieved result will be available in the result set. Okay, so in that statement for executing a particular query, the syntax is execute query, and whatever query you wanted to execute, that has to be mentioned, okay, within bracket, or you can define that SQL statement as a string, and that string can be called here. Okay, so while rs.next, the system will be printing each and every value. Whenever you say next, the next row will be printed until it reaches the end of record.